Modern corporate environments are engineered to measure volume. We evaluate talent through spotless resumes, aggressive networking, and how forcefully someone can navigate a rigid hierarchy. It is a system built to detect noise. So when a 42-year-old man named Owen Carter submitted a perfectly clean application to mop floors at a major tech firm, it should have been unremarkable. But when the CEO, Claire Bennett, saw the name at the bottom of the stack, she froze. 20 years earlier, she had sat next to Owen in advanced calculus. He was the kind of intuitive mathematician who could unpack immensely complex equations as if he were reading plain English. Yet today, he carried zero credentialed proof of that capability. In her office, Owen offered no rehearsed ambition or performative eagerness. He sat calmly in a worn jacket and explained, without a trace of bitterness, that he simply needed stable work. He wanted a job with no shifting deadlines and zero office politics. In an ecosystem entirely calibrated to reward professional performance, Owen was an anomaly. He possessed profound intrinsic capability, completely masked by his refusal to broadcast it. He was pure signal, sitting quietly in a room filled with noise. Within 2 weeks on the job, the building began to run better. Without being asked, Owen quietly re-engineered the layout of the fourth-floor supply closets, cutting restocking times completely in half. He claimed no credit and told no one. But a highly structured environment always produces a counterforce. That force was Greg Dalton, the operations manager. Dalton was a man whose entire corporate existence relied on the volume of his seniority and the visible exercise of his authority. Dalton quickly targeted the new janitor. He would interrupt Owen mid-task in front of junior staff, manufacture fake errors about scuff marks near the elevator, and loudly berate him over the smell of cleaning solutions, all to remind the room of his own rank. Owen absorbed it without a single visible reaction. He listened, nodded, and went back to work. He navigated the friction exactly the way water moves around a stone, choosing the most efficient path forward rather than stopping to fight. Claire watched from across the floor, noting how Dalton's constant interruptions and manufactured grievances were actually draining the room's momentum. She realized that his focus on rank was actively interfering with the work itself. The conflict revealed a persistent friction within the building. The hierarchy was optimized to protect rank, even when that rank was used to punish the very competence that kept the facility running. The real test of that hierarchy arrived on a Thursday morning. A cascading mathematical error struck the core of the company's flagship logistics algorithm. Left unchecked, it threatened hundreds of millions of dollars in contractual liabilities. By 11 a.m., the main conference room was packed with the engineering leads. A room filled with highly paid experts stared at a whiteboard covered in branching formulas, completely baffled by the failure point in their own system. At 11:40, Owen arrived for his regular hallway rotation. He stopped in the open doorframe, mop cart beside him, silently observing the chaotic whiteboard. After 90 seconds, he stepped past the engineers, picked up a black marker, and wrote 7 lines of exact calculus. In a single bracketed expression, he isolated the precise optimization failure that had stumped the entire department for hours. The engineers ran his logic. 11 minutes later, the code worked flawlessly. The multi-million-dollar crisis evaporated. Owen quietly grabbed his cart and went back to cleaning the floors. The event highlighted a massive blind spot in the company's logic. For all its focus on elite credentials, the hierarchy had no way to account for brilliance when it appeared without a title. The corporate structure immediately rejected the cure. By 5 p.m., Greg Dalton and the board were demanding a formal response. They ignored the millions of dollars saved, choosing instead to frame Owen's intervention as a security breach and a liability. The hierarchy was reacting exactly like an immune system fighting off a virus. The established order was unsettled by a single fact. Someone completely outside their rigid structure had effortlessly outperformed the credentialed people inside it. Realizing his presence had become a point of friction, Owen made a deliberate, quiet decision. He submitted an immediate resignation, leaving behind nothing in his supply closet but a pair of work gloves and a small notebook. In its desperate attempt to protect traditional optics and enforce protocol, the corporate machine achieved exactly what it was designed to do. It successfully purged its most valuable intellectual asset. Claire tracked his emergency contact to a rundown apartment on the east side of the city. There, she finally opened the notebook he had left behind. Its pages were filled with world-class algorithmic theories and sequencing logic, generated purely in the quiet hours of his shift work. The journal entries revealed the math of his detour. He had sacrificed his doctoral program to spend years caring for his dying parents. By the time he re-entered the workforce in his 30s, the job market heavily penalized him for his resume gap and his age, forcing him into warehouses and night shifts. Near the end of the notebook, he had written a single clear-eyed sentence. Not everyone who takes the long way around is lost. A non-linear path does not degrade intelligence. True capability remains intact. It just requires a system willing to look past the timeline of a resume to measure the actual capacity of the mind. Claire returned to the office and took decisive action. She fired Greg Dalton and forced the board to back down, addressing the same institutional rigidity that had just left the company paralyzed during a $100 million crisis. Then she brought Owen back. She didn't offer him a glamorous title or a corner office. Instead, she embedded him as an internal consultant, placing him in an empty third-floor room where his analytical, problem-solving mind could be directly utilized by the engineering teams. The following Monday, she stood in front of 400 employees and publicly reset the cultural standard. She explained exactly how the janitor had solved the algorithmic failure, framing his presence not as a liability, but as a lesson in prioritizing capability over credentials. To harness actual brilliance, modern organizations must deliberately stop rewarding the loudest voices in the room. They have to build systems that listen for the quiet ones, the people who actually know how to make the engine run.